good evening, and welcome back to Breaking Ground. I'm your host, Anne Snyder, and just really honored to be able to welcome you to a special and likely tender conversation tonight on the backs of a film that hopefully all of you have seen called The Reunited States, directed by Ben Recke, who I consider to be one of the more courageous and just contagiously open-hearted filmmakers that I know. Before I introduce our panelists, I want to let you know that we've designed this conversation a little differently than previous Breaking Ground events. If you've watched the film, you know that it doesn't deliver a dry treatment of our various national fault lines. It's not a white paper, it's not a think tank lunch. Instead, it delves really personal, revealing the sort of intertwined hot mess that is history, meeting one's own social coordinates and life experience, meeting politics, meeting unexpected, even unsolicited callings on individual freedom. And it's a mess, I think, that implicates all of us, our interior lives, our heart posture, our assumptions about reality, and what we think the good, if not the common good, is, our spheres of engagement in work and family and the neighbor and the nation, even as the film doesn't settle for the easy scapegoats that simplify or the usual doom loops of shame and distrust. In peeling back the unsung courage of those who have felt so disturbed, if not tragically wounded, by just the ferocity of our divisions, that they've been led to break out of routine relational habits to try a different way, we see an invitation to our own journeys as human beings in this era, and for many of us at Breaking Ground as Christians in this era. And it's a journey that might involve loss, but simultaneously peels back the layers on a bigger, deeper truth. A journey that might be uncomfortable and certainly full of risk, but is invariably the way of repair, and maybe the only way of repair. So in that spirit, I'd just like to invite you, our viewers, to play a role in directing tonight's conversation by articulating your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Of course, by vocation and craft, I am an editor, so I do have some themes in mind that I hope we touch, but I'm not going to commandeer it tonight. I just really like to trust and even surrender this evening to you, our audience, by helping us probe both the core perplexities this film reveals and the viable pathways that might help you, me, and our panelists navigate today's divides better, more wisely, more effectively, even if there are some lost battles along the way. The goal tonight is to serve you, to awaken something different within you, and to spark a longer set of conversations that you'd facilitate in your community on the backs of this film in the days ahead. So please take advantage of the Q&A button, and as I introduce our guests and give them a chance to speak to you directly, to just type in your questions as they arise. You'll be able to see one another's questions, and you can press a thumbs up on those from others that echo your own search, or maybe even better, articulate something you had only barely intuited. And I'm just going to represent those questions of yours that have the most energy from the crowd around them as a kind of audience ambassador. So in other words, if this were a church service, I'm going to be homing in on where those like Zoom amens, amens accumulate in sort of extra pronounced number. So I'm going to turn to our panelists now. Erin and Dave, let's start with you. Welcome. You are married. You have
Still.
3 children. Hi there. You've got 3 kids. You've recently moved to Nashville, a very new city for you, and you've had quite the wild ride since 2016. So for all of us who have sort of seen this film, we do know a little bit of your journey to date. But if you could, I just wanted to just get us out of the gate here before we really allow this conversation to be directed by those watching. Just ask you 2 questions to sort of kick us off and really introduce your voice and hearts to our audience. First, why did division start to bother you so much in 2016? What about it was so disturbing and even painful for you where you were living in Dallas? You were far from DC, but you were experiencing all this. What about it was so just disturbing? And then if you could also describe just a bit of the journey that has continued for your family since you found yourselves behind a camera, like what have been your thoughts and feelings watching recent events, in particular this 2021? So as we've only been in it a month and a few days, but already a pretty volatile year, as well as all of 2020, just on the backs of your year-long journey traveling to all 50 states and experiencing your own sort of mini conversion. Where are we finding your intuitions about all things tonight? So first, why did Division so disturb you, and sort of what has been a bit of your journey since this film was created?
I'll take the first one. At first, I want to just tell you how honored I am that you have brought us here. Every time I hang out with either you or with comment or breaking ground or something in this world, it makes me a better human in many ways. It causes me to think deeper. I love reading the stuff that you guys are doing. Most of them are written beyond the fourth grade level, so it's hard for me on some of them. But it's a joy. So it's a joy to be with you guys tonight. It's humbling to be here. So thank you, just first off, for thinking enough of us that we might have something useful to say to the folks who are on tonight. But so to answer your question, I got really deep into partisan politics, and for me, it was a war for the soul of the nation. It was the good guys versus the bad guys. The good guys were the Republicans, trying to save the country, trying to preserve freedom, trying to preserve the institutions that have led us to where we are today, capitalism and liberty and things like that, versus the Democrats, which were trying to tear apart the Constitution, legislate from the bench, and just change the country that we love so much, if you will. And so that was really my mindset, is it was a good versus evil. And when it was looked at like that, it was really easy for me when working for the RNC to go and drop leaflets on I remember this time, it was on Sunday morning in Northern Virginia. Tim Kaine was running against a Republican governor candidate. I was working on behalf of the Republican candidate. I went to a Sunday morning during church and put political flyers on the windshield wipers of the people while they were in church, talking about how evil Tim Kaine was and that he was going to kill all the babies if he was elected governor of Virginia because he was an abortion guy. I can't believe I did that kind of crap. But, when it is a battle of good versus evil, it is like it's a win at all costs kind of deal. And so that was the mindset going into it. And then working for Senator Corker, which was my last kind of role in the political realm, I began to see that it was no longer good versus evil, that my side, the closer I got into it, was not a whole lot different than my enemy, that the good guys were not so good and the enemy was not so evil, that we both sides of the political spectrum, both pieces of the machine of our politic, had a higher goal than the good of the country. It was a goal and a quest for power and control, for re-election and those things, and how it was so discouraging for me to see that we had moved from what I thought was a battle of good versus evil to both of these institutions could bring our country to its knees. And what I saw is that they were just more completely dysfunctional. To be in the United States Senate, it's the most dysfunctional institution I've ever been a part of in my entire life. And I've been a part of some dysfunctional organizations. It is so inept at doing basic stuff. It is absolutely broken. And so leaving that after 12 years, it was so sad because I was a patriot. I was doing that for public service. And so for 4 or 5 years, we just stopped paying attention to the news, and it was just glorious. We just kind of checked out from it all. But in 2016, I'm now getting to your question. It took me a bit.
Thank you for the runway. It's okay.
In
Thanks.
2016, what I saw was a new level of division that was beyond what I had been a part of before. And the thing that I saw that was different was violence. For me, before that point, throughout my political career, it was disagreement. The Tea Party was a watershed moment when I was involved in the Senate. That was yelling. It was a new level of passion that I hadn't seen before, and they hated us most of the time, but I kind of thought it was cool because people were getting so passionate. They were paying attention to how people were voting for the first time, as opposed to just electing folks and trusting them and not ever seeing them again for another 2 years. But what happened in 16 was all of a sudden it was no longer passion and disagreement. It was, I actually want to kill you. I want to see you bleed. And to me, that was a step down a road that I was like, I can't not do anything while I see fellow citizens wanting to kill each other. So there's my answer to your long question. Do you want to answer the other question? Did I leave any time for my beautiful bride to answer number 2?
Yeah, I'll jump in. And that watershed moment for Dave was obviously a wake-up call, and that was when we began thinking about forming Undivided Nation, the nonprofit that sort of was the vehicle, no pun intended, for our journey. From that point, we decided the only way to really find out about the root causes of our division, because we truly did not understand what was making people so filled with hate. So we decided, after some sleepless nights, that we needed to do something pretty radical. And so we decided to sell our house and quit our jobs and take our 3 kids, who were very small, 2, 5, and 6, onto an RV and live our lives in all 50 states and just sit at the feet of Americans and very simply ask them why they thought the country is so divided and where this hate is coming from. And we had a theory that it was going to be a lot of conversations around politics and policy. And we very quickly found that this goes a lot deeper, and that this is rooted in the foundations of our nation. And really, it's rooted in our hearts. And that in our hearts, when I say our hearts, I'm talking about my heart, his heart, our collective heart. And that was one of the most disappointing moments of my life. I had no idea I was going to find myself at the root of the problem was shocking. So
that's good.
Yeah, it was shocking. And that's an important revelation, I think, that we all need to at least consider and ponder. But since our journey and since the film, which we loved being a part of, we have continued our learning journey. We stopped living on an RV, but we took a year to live in Charlottesville, and we started a podcast in which we felt very compelled to amplify the voices of the stories we heard across America and give them a chance to share their story with a broader audience, in an effort to find points of connection in our humanity. And so we did that. I wrote a memoir of our journey and its impacts on me as a white evangelical. And then we dove into a very strange season where we lived in Hawaii for a bit, to learn a little bit more about the Hawaiian sovereignty movement, which ended up being a crash course in learning about what it's like to suffer from racism, which is a whole different topic. And now we are living in Franklin, Tennessee, and I'm continuing with Undivided Nation, and Dave is focused more on learning about and working in the realm of health equity, which was one of the biggest, darkest things that we found on our journey, was the inequitable situation we have in this country around health and access to good health care. That was very long. I apologize for that long.
We're talkers sometimes. We care about this stuff. There's not a lot of short answers, unfortunately. These aren't easy topics.
No.
These are not easy. No, thank you both. That's very helpful. And I'm hoping that our audience takes us a little bit deeper into your line in the film, Erin, and a little bit what you just said, that our political divisions are symptomatic of something that goes a lot deeper. And if, maybe this conversation will flesh out a little bit what those deeper things are. Probably a lot of us in our audience feel like we've been living in those questions the last year plus. But I think just to hear from your on the ground, hearing the narratives of Americans everywhere and discerning with your own kind of careful cite what those are, that would be very helpful. And then sort of, especially given what's occurred this past January, where do you see politics nowadays? So I hope we get into that. But let me just also bring Mark to the fore here. So Mark, you're another character, but real life human being in this film. And welcome. You are, I think of you as just a celebrated, very, well celebrated and experienced mediator in all kinds of high conflict zones globally, but also in the US. And your book, which I've often thought was maybe published a little bit too early to be appreciated for its prescient vision. I think it was published in 2016, but it is the namesake for this film and its inspiration, The Reunited States. And so I just want to honor you with that and let the audience know that the film is in some ways born out of your site some years ago. But last week, the same stage, Breaking Ground, had another event asking this very basic question. What is unity? Is it possible? Is it even good? And I was just kind of curious how you would answer this in the context of recent events, yes, but perhaps more importantly, in light of your own decades devoted to working in and across the crevices of divided peoples. What is unity, and is it possible? Is it good? How would you think about that with us?
Well, let me just segue from David and Erin by saying that in 2016, I got a call from a guy in Dallas who just listened to me talk about the book on Dallas Public Radio. His name was David Leaverton, and he said, I read your book and I need to talk to you. So, that's how we met, and how I recommended them to Ben Rickey to be part of the film. And it's not directly related to your question about unity, but it is in a sense, because I'm connected to the Leavertons now. I wouldn't be connected to the Leavertons otherwise. I don't think we would have probably ever met. And what I like about this crossing the divide work, this bridging work, is that you meet people and you encounter people who you never otherwise meet. And so is it full unity? No, but it's definitely e pluribus. And I think I'll answer your question actually by talking about the motto, national motto, for a moment, because even in the national motto, the answer to your question is unum, e pluribus unum, out of many one. So whatever unity is, whatever it is, it's got to include difference. It's got to include difference. And I think that's the key, is that, and I'm proud to be a citizen of a nation that has that motto. We don't always live up to it, but I'm proud because there are other nations where, you've got to be this religion, or you've got to be this color, or you've got to be this sect, or you've got to be this caste, or you've got to be this to really be part of the nation. And I'm proud of us for not doing that. So I know that's not a thorough answer to the question, but I think it's one of those words where, like I'm just thinking of a pie. One pie can be cut into 6 or 8 or 10 pieces. And is it still one pie? Yes. But I feel like, to me, because I've done so much global work around conflict, I did a lot of work in Africa and Asia in conflict as well as in the US. And this is not unique to America. This is a human, if I can say, spiritual problem. The spiritual problem is, where do we draw the boundaries of our soul? Where do we say we end and they begin? And Jesus and other spiritual figures have addressed that question, and I think it's really key. In fact, I'd ask everybody listening to this conversation is, where do you draw the line and say, okay, that's where we end and they begin? And from a divine perspective, all life is interconnected, and we are all part of creation. So, but look at the way we've behaved recently. In this country, clearly this is a spiritual challenge. And I think that's why people come together and pray together, is because they're trying to expand the boundaries of their love. They're trying, we say God is love, I think, because we think of him as, or her as, infinite love. Well, I can tell you my love's not infinite, but it's growing. It's growing. And this work, and I would also ask everybody to ask themselves the question, what would grow your love? Would it grow your love to just be with people who fall on the political spectrum where you are? Or would it grow your love to go a little bit to your right and a little bit to your left and see who's there? So yeah, for me, it's about growing love, and that's probably as close as I'll ever get to full unity, is committing myself to growing love.
Count me in for 6 Zoom amens to what he just said, if you're keeping count there, Anne.
Yeah, thanks, David. And yes, I see we so far don't have questions in our Q&A. So, and I know this audience is probably less used to just asking them directly. So, but I just want to encourage you to please pipe in, particularly post film. So I'll ask this, and then I'll wait for some more questions to come in. In part, given what you just said, Mark, you invoke this notion of sort of the spiritual nature of deep division. And I think a lot of us feel that deeply, feel that actually in our souls, and we can't always put words around how the boundaries fall, or for those of us who believe in certain sort of truth claims and definitions of the good, we struggle, we feel things, but it's sort of hard to travel 18 inches up. So I'm just curious if you guys wouldn't mind reflecting a little bit, and I know this probably already seems like ancient history, but given for you, the Leavertons, your journey back in, I think 2018, when you took this long trip through the whole country, and then Mark, given all of your work over these years as a bridge builder here and abroad, what were the first thoughts that hit you when you heard the news about this sort of insurrection at the U.S. Capitol in particular on January 6th? Were you surprised? Or was it more like this is the natural outworking of sort of what we've been witnessing for the last number of years? I'm just curious if you could put some color to that, just your immediate response as fellow travelers, not as people who know it all, but as those who have kind of been hearing patterns for you, Erin and Dave, throughout cities and towns and rural places throughout the country the last number of years. Just curious if you could reflect a little bit on your response to that day a few weeks ago.
Go ahead, Mark.
Go ahead,
start?
Mark.
Yeah, I'll go first just because I can lead you up to 2018, and then you guys can pick it up from there. I mean, I did the work, and with Congress in the late 90s, when I designed the retreats for the US House of Representatives. It was the last time they went away as Democrats and Republicans. And my experience then was that they had kind of said that, they called these retreats, and more than half the members of Congress went away for an entire weekend to Pennsylvania. They'd never done that before. And they did that because they knew there was a crisis going on in the House of Representatives. They knew there was a crisis beginning in America, which is that the parties didn't know how to work together. And that was 1996, 20 years before that moment that David Leaverton was speaking about a moment ago. And so I really saw the red light go on the dashboard of democracy that said add oil. And it said it in the mid 90s. And we did add oil. After that, we had the 2000 election, which was contested between Gore and Bush. We had 9/11. We had the crash in 2008. We had all the racism and chaos around Obama being elected. We've had a hell of a 16, 18 years since then. And I feel like we still haven't added oil. And I feel like the people in the film and people like the Leavertons, and probably a lot of the people like those who are listening, are people who are saying, we got to add oil. And oil is love. Oil is trust. Oil is respect. Oil is listening to people different from yourself. For those of you who've watched the film, oil is what you see those characters doing in the film, those people doing in the film. They're adding oil to democracy. And I'll finish with an automotive analogy, just that, everybody wants the newest Tesla or the best car or the best engine or, the biggest whatever. If you don't have oil in your engine, if you have a piston engine, I don't care how great your car is, it's going to die pretty soon. And that's what happened. And now lead up to your question about January 6th. That's what I saw happen on January 6th, was that, okay, if you don't think the car broke down yet, do you now? What do you need to think the car broke down? What do you need? Isn't that enough? 5 deaths. Isn't that enough? People raiding the House of Representatives in the Senate. So that's the backstory. Why don't David and Erin? Why don't you pick up in 2016, 2018? Because that's I think, Dave, what you were feeling when you called me that day, from Dallas. I think you were feeling this is really this is really bad. And that was 4 years ago, 5 years ago now. So it's been going on for a while. Over to you guys.
Yeah, I think it was very predictable what happened on the 6th. I think we've been headed in a trajectory that is kind of going from here to here, and there's nothing happening that's not going to take it to here yet. I think there are people, there are movements, there are organizations across the country that are seeing it and are beginning to work for it, but I'm not yet seeing something that's going to move us where what happened on January 6th is going to seem pretty tame to where we're going. And so, and how did I feel watching it? I really related to the folks that were storming the Capitol. I really connected with them because what they were doing was in their mind, and all that you have is what's in your mind and your perspective, because you don't know what you don't know. This is your world, it's your worldview. What they were doing is they were doing a patriotic duty to save the country from one of the biggest thefts and one of the biggest, I don't know, just horrible events in the history of our country.
They were trying to protect our democracy.
Yeah, to protect our democracy. And so, I mean, I really, on the path I was on before, before kind of these certain things that happened in my life, I was on a path that would have placed me at the Capitol to rush it, to save the country from these people trying to steal it. And so I have a level of grace and understanding for what they were doing, because I believe most of the folks were really, in their hearts, were trying to save the country. And not that what they did was acceptable, not that what they did they should not be held account for, as the laws are broken, people died and all those things. But when you have a system in place across the country, and the participants in that system are Republican Party, Democrat Party, super PACs, cable news, social media, and on, when you have all of these entities fueling this fire, it will explode, and the next explosion will be bigger. It's just because Joe Biden won doesn't mean that everything's okay now, which is the same, just because, Donald Trump won, 4 years ago or whatever, didn't mean all of a sudden that America had problems, or that America had a bunch of racist people in it or something of that nature. Like these problems predate both of those two men. And without something happening, and I think, Mark said about this oil in the engine, being loved, without a critical mass of Americans getting out of the car and saying, we're no longer going to do this. We're going to pop the hood, and together we're going to put oil in this engine collectively as a nation. I don't know how the car makes it at this point.
Dave, thank you for that. It's very sort of bravely honest of you to say that, what you just said. If you had the opportunity, say, maybe not in the immediate aftermath of storming the Capitol, where blood is high and, all sorts of hormones are raging and people are in there, they're seeing red, I'm guessing. But say in some reasonable time afterwards, 48 hours afterwards, and you were able to find a group of these fellows and just approach them as yourself, to sort of point to a different way, or maybe open up the aperture for a different perspective. Does that feel impossible, or what would you say? I mean, I guess I'm asking, like, does everyone need to kind of sell their, for those who are able, to go on the journey, very real journey that you all went on? Do you feel that way, or do you feel like there are some incremental things you could do as somewhat sympathetic to the mindset that drove that level of passion?
First off, not anybody needs to move onto an RV. This was our journey, and it was a unique journey. Now, if you want to do that, I can give you great advice on how to clean your black water tanks without getting your body and clothes dirty. That's a really important skill you need to learn if you want an RV. What would I say? I mean, I think I would start off, and it would be a unique thing I could say is, I understand why you did what you did. I really can relate to it. And we would begin a conversation, and I think we'd find out really quickly, is there hope in relationship and in this conversation? And the thing that would give me hope would not be, are they a far right-wing radical or not? The thing that would give me hope for the relationship going forward is their heart open to talking and to having a discussion, or is their heart closed off and there is no possibility of connection? And I found on the right, it's people sometimes who are so passionate about the political process, who are the biggest flag wavers on both sides of the aisle, are some of the most close-hearted people I've ever met, and do not want to talk about these things. Their solution is still the destruction of half of the country, or not a half, but probably a third of the country. How we win is by destroying the other. And so I think there is a level of this kind of bridging and unity and reconciliation that does require two willing sides, and a lot of folks who are close-hearted. I don't. I think we just kind of have to move on and find somebody else who's filled with hope. To me, I don't get really caught up much in the right left anymore, as I think so many of us have parts of us that lean right or lean left, and I don't think any of us can be clearly defined or encapsulated with our full essence by a label of Republican or Democrat. It's too small. My hope is to find the open-hearted ones. Where are the folks coming to this with open hearts?
Mm-hmm.
And I know there are people with open hearts that were part of that group, because I mean, it's easy to paint a whole mass of people based on the actions of a small number of those. Ask the folks who are part of the Black Lives Matter movement, who have gotten lumped in with a lot of, looting and fires and destruction and things. That wasn't the whole movement. I think, the group that was at the Capitol, not all of them did what they did. And a lot of folks saw what was happening in the violence, and they stepped back and said, this is not what I came here for. Mm-hmm. And so I think we've got to realize that it's not a monolithic group of people.
Erin, do you have anything just to add to that? And Dave sort of alluding to the pre-political dynamics at play here. You do say in the film, our theory that American divisions are rooted in politics got totally blown up on the first day of our journey. We learned that our political divisions are more symptomatic of something that goes so much deeper. Where do you see politics nowadays in the context of this something that goes a lot deeper? Or you could answer, what is the something that is so much deeper? I'd be curious just to hear you articulate that in the context of the last couple of years.
Questions. I think that the reason we find so much identity in our political affiliations is because we are searching for something that encapsulates, this is who I am, this is what I believe, this is but like Dave just said, and like Mark has told us in the past, we can't define ourselves in these binaries. It's unhealthy, and it strips us of the beauty and the individuality that we each carry as human beings. You could line up a group of people that cross the whole political spectrum, and I could go sit with each of them and we could talk and connect in story, regardless of where we land on certain topics or issues. And the divide in our politics has robbed us of that opportunity. It has created an other that is an enemy and someone to be defeated, and not someone to get to know. And I think Mark is exactly right about the timing of when this began, but it's kind of like boiling a frog. I think it's happened very slowly over time, and we have slowly given ourselves our true essence up in order to be a part of something that we think is big. But the truth is, who we truly are, our true essence, is the biggest thing and the most beautiful thing. And if we can find our way back to that and start to shed some of the layers of identity politics. I mean, that's a term that we use because it's real, and find the interconnectedness that we share. And that is spiritual. I've been reading a lot about quantum entanglement, which Einstein wrote a lot about. And
that's on her side of the bed. Those books. Those books are not on my side of the bed. Just let the record show.
I found this quote. It's beautiful, and it's from a 17th century poet. I'll share it with you. No man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. And those are very simple words, but it's very true. And if we try to create the illusion that we're only part of one little expression of humanity and everything else is unimportant and needs to be defeated, then we ourselves are cutting ourselves off from a piece of us, that we're robbing ourselves of experiencing the fullness of who we are, because we're all a little piece of a puzzle. And I believe that this is, if we want to get into what Jesus said, his final prayer was that we would be one, as he and the Father are one. And that is an incredible thing to think about, to ponder, and even more so to pursue. And, love is patient, love is kind, love keeps no record of wrongs. And we have to figure out a way to hold people accountable without keeping a record of wrongs.
Can I hop on that island thing? I thought that was good. I think what it feels like is we're becoming these isolated islands in the middle of the ocean. And having lived on an island in the middle of the ocean for a while, like, it robbed you of a lot. Like, we no longer had the ability to go and put on a little flannel sweater and feel the fall, look at the fall leaves changing or something, because, and how that's happening, I think, in our country, we segregate ourselves into smaller and smaller groups of people who look and think and act and feel and have worldviews like we do, that we begin to live in these vanilla and safe worlds that seem really ideal. But man, from someone who's lived a lot of his life on an island in the middle of an ocean of kind of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant heterosexual married male, there is so much life outside of that island, and to bring people back together and away from these kind of just isolated islands across the world. There's so much beauty on the other side, is what I'll tell my fellow tribesmen, that the rest of this country is absolutely spectacular.
And I would say, just to add to that it's not fun to live your life afraid of your other, just cowering in fear. Life is good when you're not afraid of your other, whether that's your political other or your racial other or your socioeconomic other. Diving into someone else's world, that's where you're going to find life. And it's fun.
But I'll say, so I think it's always good to think about, some people have a reason to be afraid of their other.
Yes.
If you are living in Charlottesville, Virginia, and you've got people saying, you're not going to replace us, I think there's a level of fear that's rational. And you need to
I'm talking
escape.
about if you can, what you're doing, Anne, cultivating spaces of encounter and engaging the other is something I think we can try to cultivate in our spheres.
I feel like we're talking too much. I need some Gerzon time.
Yeah, go Gerzon.
You could hear that Texan accent. Mark, I'm going to sort of go from Erin. She was actually beginning to, we all know here, if we've ever been to a wedding, she was beginning to quote 1 Corinthians 13, the famous love passage, that I think anyone, Christian or not, knows, and honors sort of the poetry of those definitions around what love is. But we have a question here from those watching. This is from a Laurel, and she asks, this is for you, Mark. I'm struck by your thought that growing love is the key to unity, as well as the acknowledgement and acceptance of difference. I want this for America. What are your thoughts on how individual citizens of different faiths, beliefs, and creeds grow such love?
Well, bless Laurel for her question. Well, I'll answer her question by building on what Dave and Erin said, that I think we grow our love by opening our hearts. And that's almost a cliche, a hallmark cliche. But I think a lot of those people charging the Capitol were exactly what Dave said. All they had was what was in their minds. And we have words in the English language like heart and soul for a reason. Is our heart open, and is our soul alive and seeking? And you know, our national poet laureate, the first national poet laureate, who was a Native American woman named Joy Harjo, one of her better poems, she says, you know, watch your mind so it doesn't run away with your heart. And I think as a Native American, she looks at our culture and she sees a culture where our minds have run away from our hearts. We've left our hearts behind. And that to me is the way we grow our love, to go to Laurel's question. We grow our love by saying, is my heart open? And when David and Erin were talking about fear, you don't want to be fear of the other. If there's a country in which the right fears the left and the left fears the right, and blacks fear whites and whites fear blacks, and you know, everybody fears it, that's going to close our hearts. And that's disastrous for democracy, because if we close our hearts, we essentially close our minds. And that connection that Dave was talking about, where we're not an island, what makes us an island? Well, getting caught up here, locked up in here with my view on, pick something that I've studied a lot of, you know, pro-life or pro-choice. You get locked up there, you can start forgetting that your heart is saying, my heart beats for the mother making a tough decision. My heart beats for the fetus who, you know, yearns to live. My heart beats for the family that, you know, loves them both. You know, you can still have your opinion about pro-life and pro-choice, but if your heart's open, you're going to deal with it so differently. And one of my baptisms in this field, Anne, was of being very close to the people who did the 5-year dialogue between pro-life and pro-choice women in Boston in the late 90s. And it was a private dialogue that went on for 5 years. And at the end of the 5 years, the pro-life women and the pro-choice women were still pro-life and pro-choice. The difference was they were friends. They went to each other's funerals and weddings. They didn't call each other names. They had cleaned up their language, so they weren't calling each other, you know, foul names because of the position they held. And they'd actually started to explore how could they reduce unwanted pregnancies by working together. So to me, you know, the notion that we don't know what to do to grow our love, we know. We know. Yeah. People on this call know. We all know. The question is, do you have the political will to do it? And the forces, as Dave and Erin were saying, the forces now that close our hearts. I mean, we essentially we're in a kind of Twitter-fed mental universe in which it's very easy to forget you have a heart and a soul, you know? And that's why I'm delighted about the work you're doing in this Breaking Ground community, because we need to bring the heart and soul back into public discourse, because it's part of who we are as a people.
Mark, thank you. I want to sort of yoke a question that has come in from someone named Rebecca. I'm just using first names here. Who just this sort of concept of heart and mind coming back together, being integrated. I used to have a sort of Ignatian spiritual director who would always talk about, I said 18 inches up, but he would always say, go 18 inches down. I just figure out how to connect these two. And Rebecca asks, and I think this is on many people's minds recently, it's been building, I would say, the last couple of years, but it seems to have popped in the last month as we talk about a country that is yes, we've known for a while that there are at least two, if not many, many more Americas and American experiences. And that's one thing. And I think still you can come to sort of a tenuous unity, or at least peace with that, with some virtues and empathy, et cetera, that we've been describing. But now it feels like there's something more troubling happening, namely multiple realities, that truth is not just relative, but that we literally see. I mean, even Dave's describing his sympathies in some sense, I think very humbly, with those who charge the Capitol. That's like an ability to leap into a totally different, what we might call reality or set of convictions. So Rebecca asks a hard question, I think, and very salient right now. Do you believe that facts are essential, that embracing truth is essential before we can come to a place of real dialogue where empathy and love can take root?
I think some quest for this imaginary, universally understood and agreed upon fact is a waste of time. I think any attempts I've ever seen to try and like, well, we all just got to agree on this one set of facts or something like that. I don't see it. Here's what I do see is that I do not have to lay down my truth to welcome you and your truth. We don't have to agree on facts to collaborate, to open our hearts to one another. Mm-hmm. There is not a single, I've never seen anybody who can truly like say, this is the reality. This is the all encompassing reality. We all just have the reality we think of. And I think when we went on our journey, I truly felt I was a learned man. I was a well-rounded man. I had a true understanding of the reality of America. And what happened is I went and opened my heart and opened my ears to people, is I realized that my reality, my worldview wasn't wrong, it was incomplete. And I think that's one of the big things for us, is that these people may not be necessarily wrong. They just may not have, whoever that other is, they may just not have the perspective that I have with the background and the brokenness in my family. Maybe I'm alienated, maybe, whatever that may be. And this is my place to find community. So I don't think the quest for like this shared reality or this shared set of facts is going to be fruitful. I just would almost say, I honor you and the facts that you come to the table with, that you believe are your facts, because it's just their reality and their perspective, and have those, and I bless you and have those. But if you can come to the discussion, whether it be on one of these really divisive issues, with an open heart, your facts and my facts can live together in the same place.
I agree. I think that I think facts are different from truth as well. Yeah. I think coming together with our two truths allows us to help to shape a reality together.
A deeper truth,
a deeper truth, a more profound truth.
I think an invitation, when that happens, when two truths come together, I think it's an invitation to learning. Mm-hmm. And I think truth needs to be married to learning. That's where it gets exciting, and that's where it gets like democracy. And this democracy wasn't perfect when we started. We've had to learn to improve it. So I didn't want to interrupt you, Erin, but I just wanted to say
that was good.
It's perfect.
I think truth needs to be married to learning, because if it's not, it becomes what one of my mentors called freeze-dried. It's freeze-dried truth. And think about any field, even science. The truths have not been stable in science for 200 years. The truths in map making, the truths in mapping space, the truths in medicine haven't been, they're not static. So the first responsibility of a citizen in America, I said in the United States of America, is to be a learner. And that's what the founding fathers, back to you, Erin, I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, Mark, that's exactly, what you said is, you so eloquently put it. We're so obsessed with getting it right, like making sure that the facts are right, and we're missing each other because of that. We're not seeing one another.
More fact checkers won't bring them together.
If I am standing in front of you, Anne, and I'm asked to describe you, and someone else is standing behind you and is asked to describe you, what we describe is going to sound like two different objects.
Sets of facts, realities, yeah.
But the fact is, we're looking at the same thing from two different perspectives, from two different experiences. And if I fight with the person standing behind you and refuse to accept what they see, then I'm refusing a whole side of you that I can't see.
To take poverty, for example, I can say how I looked at the policy aspect of poverty and people living in poverty as a large amount of lazy takers from the government living off of the government dole. And that was my truth, because that was my perspective, if you will. And then I came with my truth with a curiosity that Mark talks about, and stepped into a world that I thought I knew. And I all of a sudden learned that there was such a thing as systemic racism, and that there were institutional injustices that predated my grandparents, that had led us to this point of where we were today. I was like, oh my gosh. So, So yeah, I just want to kind of throw that, not just looking at Anne from the back of her head versus the front, but this is kind of an example of how we do this today. And so if we're going to have, a policy discussion on poverty, we need those different perspectives, so we can kind of see it from its different perspectives.
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to sort of tease out something that you all just inspired, and I'm sort of also asking this as a way of threading the needle through some of the questions that have come in the last 10 minutes. We have Mark, who is, I think, by both trade and deep vocation and charism, is a deep bridge builder. And you all, Erin and Dave, you have, I don't know if you would call yourselves bridge builders, but you were seeking to understand the other side of the bridge that you were, or wall really, that you were living on a number of years ago. And I think we're in a moment, especially with this new administration in the US, where a lot of talk about bridge building and the sort of field around it that has cropped up. And I would, I'm very committed to bridge building myself vocationally. So I say this with some tentativeness because I'm deeply grateful for the fact that this has become a more valued thing on some part of our civic life. But I think certain people say, maybe right of center, hear it coming from those of a more sort of progressive set of mindsets, and even more just like the feel of what it is. They're suspicious. They think it means that they have to somehow be converted and believe the same things. And so we talked about this in terms of defining unity, certainly last week and then tonight a little bit. But when you think about like what I want to tease out sort of a scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset. So what exactly are bridge builders for right now? Is it simply for societal survival and kind of an uneasy, fragile peace that we have to daily sow just to keep ordinary grace and normalcy? Or is it for sort of a deeper set of truths? Like, how do we think about this in a national context? I think we have a lot of people watching who are part of churches and have a certain conception of unity and peace in a deeply sort of spiritual sense with their brethren. But how do we think about that in this pluralistic society? What is bridge building for? How deep do the goods go? Any one of you can try to tackle that.
It's a deep question to come to here at our end. I'm thinking of prayer, because as you were speaking about the question, I was thinking, I think I see bridge building kind of like prayer. And I was very disappointed when the Institute of Faith and Politics in Washington used to bring Democrats and Republicans together, not only for prayer, weekly prayer meetings, but also they would take them on kind of journeys together to go visit sites to learn more about America together. They did it together as Democrats and Republicans. They would pray together as Democrats and Republicans. Why was I sad when that ended? Because I feel that when you pray together with across the divide, you're likely to be more in touch with God. You're not praying to a partial God. You're praying to a God together with people you differ from. So when they say that, I think you said it when we spoke recently, and Sunday morning is the most segregated hour of the week. It's like when I've been in churches that are multi-ethnic and multiracial and multicultural, and they're singing hosannas or praising the Lord. I just felt it now in my body. I just felt a tingle, because I think you can feel, I'll use the Christian term, the Lord, you can feel God more present when the hosannas are being sung by the multitudes. And I've been in some settings, but Buddhist and Christian and Jewish, where, in Catholic masses, where I look, it's like this band of humanity about this big. And sometimes it can be very moving too, but it's a different experience. So I would say to your beautiful questioner, to me, bridging is for prayer. Bridging is to get us closer to our own hearts. Bridging is to get us closer to each other as human beings. And bridging is to get us closer to God. If we believe in creation and if we believe in God, then we have to believe that God created those people on the other side. Who created them? So I've never thought of this before. I really am grateful to the questioner, because I was, to be honest with you, when I first heard the question, I thought, I don't know what I'm going to say. And I think it was So what came out, I'm going to be reflecting on after we close tonight. Thank you, questioner. Thank you so much.
Yeah. What do you think bridging is?
You know, the one thing that came to mind, I'm doing the best I can with sometimes these beautiful, eloquent questions. So I'm going to pick the piece of it that I felt like I connected with, and instead of trying to grasp the entirety of what you're saying. I went on this journey across the country in search of unity. And what I learned that it's a whole lot harder than I thought it was, and it's a lot more action oriented than I thought it was. And I'll give you an example. On our fourth state in Savannah, Georgia, I was reaching out to, just like we did, we'd show up in places and know nobody and just start cold calling people to try and have lunch or something like that. I reached out to an African-American leader in the community. He was 85 years old, and he had lived in Georgia, the deep South, for 85 years. So you kind of imagine what life was like when he was born, pre-civil rights. And, you know, he's experienced Jim Crow, things of that nature. And here comes me to, hey, I'm here. We're on this journey across the country and want to talk about unity. And we're really excited about having a conversation to bridge the divides. And how can we have reconciliation between you and me, brother, and that kind of deal. And as I'm talking to him on the phone, I can just hear him audibly rolling his eyes. It was that loud. And he was not connecting with what I was saying, which made me talk more. I was like, hey, he's just not catching my energy. I'm the unity guy. I'm not one of those, weirdos. And at some point he just stops me and he goes, David, even if I had time to meet with you, I don't think I would. And I was like, oh, that was honest. He goes, it's hard to be reconciled with somebody who has a boot on your neck. And I just sat with that in silence for a couple of hours. The conversation ended after that, and we never met each other. And I learned a lot about that unity is not walking up to a man who's on the ground and has someone standing over him, oppressing him with a boot on his neck, and talking to him about unity and forgiveness and reconciliation. That to him, unity is me walking up, doing everything in my power to get the damn boot off his neck so he can breathe again, doing anything that I can to allow him space to get up on his own, or do everything I can to offer a hand to help him stand up again. And admitting that I'm probably pretty connected to the person who was standing on top of him with the boot more than I'd like to realize. What did that boot look like? How did I benefit from that boot? How did I enable that boot? And then once he kind of sees that I've gone through that journey in my life, then maybe we could start having a conversation about unity. But that's a long ways off.
In line of that, thinking about the boot, I think if I were to describe what I think bridging is, it's an invitation for everyone out of the mindset of victimhood. I think a lot of the violence we're seeing is coming from people who feel like, let me say this, being victimized is real and is important to acknowledge, but staying under the mindset of victimhood is very damaging for our soul, because it does not, I've said this about anger, I think I'm going to say it about victimhood too. Those are both very important things, but they're hallways we need to pass through. They're not rooms we should sit in. Because when we do, we cut ourselves off from one another. And if you live in the mindset of victimhood, like, and this is not to diminish being victimized, but when we don't call ourselves higher out of that into a powerful place of love and forgiveness and honor, for the person who victimized us, or for ourselves, if we ourselves were the victimizers, I think what we do is we cut off the opportunity for accountability, and we stay in the place of shame. And shame is not a room where love can operate. Love is patient, love is kind, it keeps no record of wrongs. We talked about this earlier. Shame will not allow for that, because you've labeled someone and you've said whatever it is you said or did is now who you are. And accountability is calling our fellow humans higher into their true identity and reminding them of who they truly are, which is not a label. You're not a Republican. You're not a Democrat. You're Anne. You're Mark. I'm Erin. You're David.
Hi.
And we have this incredible opportunity to move past our wounds and process those together and move into the place of seeing the gold in one another. And that's for me what unity is. And I think that's what bridge building is about, is finding the gold in one another.
It's beautiful, all three of you. Thank you for that. I'm looking at the clock and I feel slightly imprisoned by it. I would love to keep talking to you longer for many more hours. And I know our audience would just love to probably be in a small circle with you, listening and asking and working through things collectively. But just in the context of the time we promised, I guess you've sort of answered this, but maybe as sort of a way of sharing a last word with our listeners. You know, there's some level, I think, watching the film, which we haven't even touched on all the specifics. I wanted to ask you, Dave, you know, how you felt when you had that lunch with Susan and her colleagues, but there will probably be future opportunities, and I encourage everyone watching these folks are somewhat on a road show with this sort of reflecting on the narratives that this film portrays. But, you know, I think at some level, the film is both beautiful and it doesn't leave anyone watching with easy pathways forward. And in some ways, your journey on an RV to all 50 states, Mark, your years of doing this work, there are no shortcuts. And I think at some level, to be an honest person these days, or a person of some integrity, is to be very, very genuinely humbled, if not confused, on a daily basis. And even in that, you know, like even in our fears and tentativeness and whiplash between different points of view that can seem fierce, you know, various stakes, in the midst of all of that, what have you, in this moment in time, what do you know to be true, or know to be sort of a key to living tomorrow in light of where you have grown over the last few years on your journey, Erin and Dave and Mark? I think, you know, where you live and give every day. If you could impart sort of one, even a proverb to our listeners in the context of this very divided era across multiple fault lines, what would that be?
Having lived in the DC world for a while, it's easy to spend the majority of your time pontificating policy studies, grand nationally changing ideas and movement and stuff. And so my proverb would be is sometimes there are seasons to do that, and it's important, but I think there are other seasons to love your neighbor who actually you drive by on the way to work, and to actually put love and faith into action. And that's to put down 140 character Twitter comments. That means putting down some of these things that have become part of our regular life, to unplug and to get to step into the brokenness that is everybody's life, and to allow yourself to authentically be seen by somebody, and to be loved and to love. And I think that that's where my headspace is in, having spent so much time trying to like write and lead and think of these ideas. I'm like going like this right now. It's like, how can I just be a member of a community and a man that loves his neighbor as well? And I think, to me, that's all I feel like I can affect these days. And I think it's not a bad way to go about things. So there's my proverb. It's a really long one. It's the Message translation.
Erin, how would you match that compliment?
Yeah.
I should say.
Yeah. Honestly, I think the thing that has struck me so profoundly in the last few weeks is just this very simple phrase: consider others better than yourself.
That's good.
That's
so good.
So simple and so profound. And I don't know that I think the greatest teacher of that is probably children. I have 3 little people in my life, and Grace in particular, our oldest, who has Down syndrome, has taught me so much about what that looks like. And so, and Jesus said, don't look down on the little children because theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And whoever can become like a little child can enter into the kingdom of heaven. And so these are the most basic of concepts that I'm sort of clinging to right now, and realizing that they are more profound than the most complex concepts we could try and tackle. So Dave's narrowing it down, and I think I am too, to just every day to try and consider others better than myself while I'm driving, like while I'm, whatever it is I'm doing, and to put that into practice in a real way.
Thanks, Erin.
Well, I'll give my final word to the Black writer James Baldwin, because there's been 4 white people talking about America. And James Baldwin, I'm paraphrasing him, but he said, "We are trapped in a history that we do not understand. And only when we understand it will we be released." Mm-hmm. And yeah, that'll be my closing thought. That's why I go back to learning. James Baldwin was calling us, particularly white folks, but I think my Black friends would say it applies to black folks too. His literal quote was, "White people are trapped in a history that we do not understand, and until we understand it, we will not be released." Mm-hmm. And I think that's a message. To now to quote Martin Luther King, James Baldwin was inviting us to become free, as white people to become free, and for all of us to become free. And so I'll close with his words. Thank you, James Baldwin. And thank you, Anne Snyder.
Yes. No, don't put those 2 names in the same sentence. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, James Baldwin. And thank you, all of you, and thank all of you watching. I really encourage you to tell your friends and others beyond your family about this film. Maybe it's a prompt for unlikely conversations or hard conversations that you've been trying to have in other ways. There's nothing like something outside of yourself that draws something from within yourself to spark a new way forward. And I just want to compliment the filmmaker, Ben, Rookie, but also all of you, and then the other characters in the film, for just trusting your stories to the world to see and to make something out of. And just thank you for sharing with our audience. This event will be recorded, and we're going to edit it and share. So feel free, for those who were touched by this conversation, to share with your circles. I just want to say, from all of us at Breaking Ground, again, we remain very honored to have you sort of traipse with us through these topsy-turvy, challenging times that we're in 2020 and now 2021, and with our writers and sort of the community shepherds that are bravely lighting a more excellent way. And we just look forward to trying to provide a different sort of compass than the binary choices that beckon and pressure all of us every single day, especially I think in the national public square. And we hope it's a compass rooted in that 1 Corinthians 13 definition of love, in truth, hope, and yes, probably a way of suffering and some form of deep surrender. So we're here for all of that with you, and want to thank you and wish you good night.